An Apache woman is in labor. The Mexican army is 3 miles away. She cannot scream. A single sound could cost her entire band their lives. This is not a movie scene. It's 1880, the Chihuahua Desert. And what this woman is going to do in the next few hours has been documented by historians, recorded in Apache oral testimonies, and analyzed by researchers of Native American women's history for decades. What you'll see today is Apache childbirth as it actually happened, the real practices, the role of the midwives, the rituals, the cradle board, and the most extraordinary documented case of all, a woman who gave birth in the desert while fleeing from the cavalry, with a single female warrior as her companion, without a camp, without enough food, without making a single sound. By the end of this video, you'll understand why 19th century observers wrote that childbirth among Apache women seemed, in their own words, a non-event, and why those observers were completely wrong. Before we get to the moment of childbirth in the desert, you need to understand the system that existed when there was time to prepare. Because Apache childbirth was not something that simply happened. It was a communal event, with precise protocols, defined roles, and a network of medical knowledge transmitted across generations of women. Anthropologist Maurice Opler, who spent years working directly with the Chiricahua Apache in the 1930s and published his landmark work, An Apache Lifeway, in 1941, documented in detail the beliefs and practices surrounding birth. From pregnancy onward, the community surrounded the woman with practical and spiritual protection simultaneously. Apache childbirth did not take place in the center of the camp. It took place in a separate space, set apart, prepared in advance. Experienced women, those we would today call midwives, were summoned. In the Chiricahua tradition, the term that scholars at the Culture and Heritage of America's Indigenous People portal document is Midewiwin, a term used in Native American cultures to refer to the medicine woman who attended births. It was not an informal title. It was a recognized function within the clan. The woman in labor never gave birth lying down. This is one of the most documented differences between Native American and 19th century European birthing practices. The teaching history. Org portal. Based on primary sources from European observers of the 17th through 19th centuries, documents that Native American women gave birth standing, kneeling, or squatting, never in a horizontal position. This upright position, we know today thanks to modern obstetric research, works with gravity, accelerates labor, and reduces the mother's effort. Apache women knew this through centuries of accumulated experience. They didn't call it biomechanics, they called it custom, and it worked. Here is something the history books almost never mention, and it completely changes the picture you have of these women. The Europeans who observed childbirth among Native American women in the 19th century were bewildered by one specific thing: the speed of recovery, the teaching history. Org portal documents the testimonies of observers from the period. They described how Native American women began resuming their regular tasks within a time frame that European observers found impossible. While in 19th century Anglo-American society, women were advised to rest for at least 10 days after delivery. Some manuals recommended up to 4 weeks. Apache women returned to the movement of the camp in a radically shorter time. Researcher Sylvia Hoffert, whose work on childbirth in the 19th century was published in JSTOR Daily, documents that white observers were impressed by the fortitude, self-sufficiency, and resilience of Native American women during labor, delivery, and recovery. But she adds something crucial. That impression led observers to underestimate what was actually happening, to describe it as if childbirth was something trivial for those women, as if it didn't hurt, as if it meant nothing. What the observers didn't understand is that the context of those women was radically different from their own. An Apache woman didn't have the luxury of resting for 10 days because the camp moved when the camp needed to move, because the army didn't wait, because the group's survival was collective and no one could be left behind indefinitely. What those observers interpreted as indifference to pain was, in reality, a capacity for endurance built through years of nomadic life, constant physical training, and a collective mindset that did not separate individual well-being from the well-being of the group. 4 days after the birth, when circumstances allowed, the Apache baby was honored with a ritual that the Native American Netroots portal documents with precision: the cradle board ceremony. The cradle board, the portable wooden cradle that allowed the baby to be carried on the back, was not simply a practical object. It was the child's first home outside the mother's body, and its introduction was surrounded by meaning. The medicine man or medicine woman blessed the baby with cattail pollen, a symbol of life and fertility in Apache cosmology. If the baby was a boy, he was placed in the cradle board and lifted by the medicine person toward the 4 cardinal directions, always beginning with the east, the direction of sunrise, of new life. If it was a girl, the empty cradle board was lifted first toward the 4 directions, and then the girl was raised facing east before being placed in it. This ritual, also documented by H. Henrietta Stockel in her work Chiricahua Apache, Women and Children. Safekeepers of the Heritage, the 2000, served a simultaneous practical and spiritual purpose: to integrate the new being into the order of the Apache world, to establish from the very first moment that this boy or girl belonged to something greater than a family. They belonged to the people. The cradle board itself was a remarkable piece of engineering. The Sherman Indian Museum portal documents that Native American babies placed in the cradle board began their physical conditioning from the first day of life. The daily contact with the river, a ritual that European observers described with astonishment, was part of that process. The Apache who bathed in ice-cold water from age 6 began that cycle much earlier. They began from the very first moment they arrived in the world. But everything you've just heard happened when there was time, when the camp was relatively stable, when there were no armies a few miles away. Hold on to that, because now comes the most documented and most extraordinary case of Apache childbirth under wartime conditions. And what's going to change isn't just what you think about Apache women. It's going to change what you think about human endurance in general. 1880. The Chihuahua Desert. Victorio's forces are being pursued simultaneously by the United States Army from the north and the Mexican Army from the south. In the middle of that flight, a woman in the band goes into labor. The group cannot stop. Lozin, warrior and Chiricahua medicine woman, sister of Chief Victorio, makes a decision. She stays with her. What happens next is documented in multiple verifiable historical sources. Researcher Eve Ball, who spent decades collecting Apache oral testimonies and published In the Days of Victorio in 1970, recorded this episode through the testimonies of James K. Wakeler and other survivors. The New Mexico Historic Women Marker Program also documents it, and the Wikipedia page on Lozin, based on these same primary sources, describes it in detail. Lozin leaves the main group carrying only a rifle, a cartridge belt, a knife, and 3 days' worth of food. Nothing more. With that, she escorts the new mother and her newborn through the Chihuahua Desert toward the Mescalero Apache Reservation in New Mexico. A journey through territory patrolled by both American and Mexican cavalry. What Lozin does during that journey is, even at more than 100 years' distance, difficult to process. She needs meat for the mother who has just given birth. But firing a rifle in the desert means revealing her position. She uses her knife to kill a longhorn with her bare hands. She butchers it. She carries the meat. She needs transportation for the mother who cannot walk long distances. She steals a horse from the Mexican cavalry, escaping under a hail of gunfire. Later, she steals a second horse for herself. She steals the saddle, the rifle, the ammunition, the canteen, and even the shirt off a soldier. All of this with a newborn in the desert, evading 2 armies, and she makes it. The testimonies collected by Eve Ball in the Days of Victorio confirm that Lozin delivered the mother and baby safe and sound to the Mescalero Reservation. The New Mexico Historic Women Marker Program also documents something that adds another layer to this story. Some Apache believed that if Lozin had been with Victorio that day, instead of staying behind with the mother in labor, the ambush at Tres Castillos, where Victorio died, might have had a different outcome. A woman stayed behind to accompany a birth in the desert, and that decision possibly changed the course of the Apache War. There is one final piece of this story that almost no history book mentions: and it is the most revealing of all. 19th century observers described childbirth among Native American women as something that seemed easy, almost irrelevant. They treated it as evidence that those women were somehow less sensitive to pain, less human at bottom than European women who required weeks of recovery. That interpretation was a colonial projection. What those observers were seeing was not insensitivity to pain. It was something their culture had no adequate concept to describe. Women who had spent their entire lives building the capacity to keep functioning under extreme conditions, because failing to do so meant the death of the group. Researcher Sylvia Hoffert articulated it precisely. For Native American women whose tribes were under existential threat, there was no cultural tolerance for expressing fear. Not because they didn't feel fear, but because the collective context could not afford for fear to paralyze anyone. An Apache woman who gave birth in the desert while fleeing from the army without making a sound didn't do it because it didn't hurt. She did it because she understood that her silence was the difference between life and death for the people around her. That is not insensitivity. That is, in any language and in any century, the highest level of composure a human being can demonstrate. And they did it while bringing new life into the world. If this video opened up something you didn't expect to find, there are more stories like this waiting for you on the channel. Women that official history reduced to a single line, lives that deserve to be told in their entirety. The next story is already here.